I like that. I like that example a lot because if restriction it forces you to do anything, it forces you to think a different way.
Do you want to earn more? Work less and enjoy what you do each day. It's no secret, it can be done. This podcast with Dr. T will not only educate and inspire you, it will also teach you how to do more and be more with the time you already have. It will be like a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of your business. Here is your host, Tyson Franklin.
Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this bonus edition of It's No Secret with Dr. T. Now, my guest today, I have a repeat offender. His name is Pat Flynn. I can hear a little chuckle in the background. He was back on episode 9, and back then we were talking about being a minimalist, being a generalist. And he is an author, he's a fitness consultant, he's a business coach, and he's just written a new book called How to Be Better at Almost Anything. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to be better at almost anything. Pat Flynn, how are you doing today?
Tyson, I am well. I can't believe it was all the way back on episode 9 was our last conversation. And I remember that conversation fondly. We had a ton of fun with that. I know we chatted a while afterwards, so I look forward to part 2. Hopefully we can recreate the magic.
And we do have a lot of mutual friends. And I was just saying before I press record that your book, How to Be Better at Almost Anything, Dave Fries, who's also been a repeat offender on the show a couple of times, he gives this book a huge thumbs up. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You've got the book. It's written. Is it ready to order right now, or is it pre-orders?
Yes, yeah. Well, you can pre-order it now, and I will simply mention that there's good reason to do so if you're interested in the book, of course. So, listen to the interview first before you think of your mind about that.
Yeah, listen to this interview. You might go, "Oh, this guy's a dill. I don't want to read his book."
Yeah. You might conclude that that would be the worst decision of your life. But if you are interested in the book, we in proper book launch fashion, we have a lot of really cool stuff that we're giving away for people who either pick up 1 copy or 3 copies. We have a lot of extra resources for various skill development, especially for business owners. We have a lot of stuff on how to build a following on social media, how to build an email list, how to be a better marketer, email marketer, a lot of really kind of specific tactical resources that really work to complement the general principles and philosophy of the book. And we've got lots of cool fitness stuff too if anybody needs help getting in shape. So that's at howtobebetterbook.com. But again, don't go there yet. Make sure you enjoy the interview and agree with what we say first. But that's the website to hold in the bank.
Okay, I think that's great. And when we spoke last time, we spoke about how you help people do more with less. And I take it the book is based around the same principle.
Yes. So we talked about the sort of 2 guiding principles, in my life, and especially in my approach to business, but were originally developed in fitness. One is the idea of minimalism, trying to figure out what's the shortest path from A to B. And when you think about minimalism, at least the way that I present it, it makes you wonder why you would want to be anything else aside from a minimalist, because minimalism to me is just that perfect cross-section between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness being doing the right things, and efficiency being doing things right. So we're trying to think of it that way. Like, when would you ever want to be ineffective or inefficient? Yet people do it all the time. I mean, take fitness, for example.
Yeah.
People want to get stronger, but then they will do a lot of things really efficiently that are ineffective. They'll spend a lot of time on cardio machines or running, and that's fine for increasing cardiovascular capacity, but it's a wholly ineffective effort if you want to build muscle, right? So that's one example of somebody being ineffective, even though they might have great running form and be very efficient at that technique. Flip it around. You can have somebody doing something that's effective, say weightlifting, but they're very inefficient at it. They don't understand programming variables. Their technique is really bad. So the approach of the minimalist, or trying to find that minimum effective dose, is trying to constantly maximize both effectiveness and efficiency. How do I do the right things? How do I do things right? That's the approach. The outcome that I want people to shoot for is generalism, getting good to great at many different things. So again, in fitness, and then we can talk about this in business, I'm not particularly interested in being a world-class powerlifter. I'm not particularly interested in being in the Olympics for gymnastics. But I want to be strong. I want to be very strong. I want to be lean. I want to be mobile. I want to be able to run a few miles without losing my breath. I want to be able to do all those things, at least good to great. And that to me has been a much more worthwhile pursuit. I found that for most people, that's what they want anyways. Very few people really want to be a Michael Phelps or expect they can be a Michael Phelps. I would argue you're probably not going to be a Michael Phelps, so don't bother even playing that game to begin with.
That makes sense.
And same thing with business is I think a lot of the the success that I've had, if I'd had any success at all, comes down to the fact that I'm not the best at any one thing, but I'm good to great, or at least fairly competent at a lot of different things. Writing, advertising. I've got stuff to say about fitness, backgrounds in philosophy, economics, and somehow I've been able to stack and layer these skills to really present something unique and interesting to people. So my proposal is for people to start thinking about generalism and specifically how skill stacking or layering many different skills, of which you might be even just fairly competent at, can really give you a creative and competitive advantage over the hardcore lifelong specialist.
I had another guest on called Dennis Freber, who's a magician, and he was talking about the same thing about learning multiple skills, not being an expert at anything, but just learning all these skills and stacking them on top of each other because you don't know when you may have to call on that particular skill. And I think we've been brought up by society, school system, that they want you to be an absolute expert at something. And when you spend a little bit of time in a lot of different areas, they think, oh, geez, you're a bit flighty. You can't stick to anything. But you're actually learning a really good skill base that you can apply in so many areas. And you can hold conversations with people when you know a little bit about a lot.
Yeah, it makes you a lot more interesting as a person. If like I have a lot of touch points with almost anybody. I can have a conversation with almost anybody because I'm interested in so many different things. I'm looking at my guitar here. I have a background in music as well. I'll admit that certain professional sports might be my weak point, right? But then I can at least draw in certain background knowledge in fitness and general athleticism to find common points for conversation there as well.
Yeah.
And then you can think, well, as a business owner, I mean, that's just an enormously powerful thing, especially for networking, being able to just build relationships with people, having those common touch points, holding many various different interests and skills. It really all comes together in a lot of different ways. But I would agree. I mean, I think of somebody like Steve Martin. Does he write the absolute funniest jokes? That's debatable, right? But he's a great entertainer in so many different ways. He can play the banjo, right? He's like a dancer and performance artist in many other ways. So it's like these different kind of unique, quirky skills that he brought to the stage that made him such a famous comedian. And people might not know this. He also has a background in philosophy. He was a philosophy major in school. So
okay.
A lot of and part of the argument that I make is when you look at a lot of people who we may think they are the best in the world at one thing, it turns out they're actually just really good at a lot of different things and have learned to combine them. Another example of music would be somebody like one of my favorite guitarists growing up, from your neck of the woods, Tyson, Angus Young from AC/DC.
Yes, Angus.
Australia, man. And people like, oh, man, Angus is the best guitar player in the world. Well, not really. There's so many virtuosos that can blow him out of the water on pure technical skill, but he's got stage presence, right? He's an entertainer. He wears the schoolboy outfit. It's kind of like Kiss, too. Like, they're definitely not the best. Like, if there was some objective measure of musicianship, I don't think Kiss has taken the gold prize on that.
Yeah.
But they can write catchy tunes. They're certainly good musicians, and they can put on a theatrical show like you wouldn't believe. They're great entertainers. So it's, again, diversity of skill, diversity of presentation that has made them so successful and powerful, even though there's better guitar players than Angus Young or better singers or drummers than people in Kiss. So I think and there are exceptions to that. I'll admit that Michael Phelps is just one of them. But a lot of people aren't the specialists that we often assume, at least not the hardcore lifelong specialists. And it's the generalization and the skill stacking that I would argue has really contributed to their success. I
agree with you 100%, which is why I got you back on here. Now, on the cover of your book, there were 3 things that you have written on there in these little circles. So I do have a pre-copy of it, which is good. First one was learn anything quickly, stack your skills, and number 3 was dominate. What do you mean by those 3 things? And why did you put those 3 things on the cover of your book?
Yeah, well, that's what the book is about, a couple different things. So if you can have a minute to try and cram my elevator pitch in here.
Go for it.
The first thing is making the case for generalism generally. Like, why should you be a generalist? And the case there is I argue you'll have more creative and competitive advantages in life if you focus on getting good to great at a lot of different things and then stacking your skills so that way you can dominate. But part of that is a study in skill acquisition itself. How do we get better at things, especially if we're starting a little bit later in life, which I did for many of my skills. It's one thing if you're trained as a child, it's just you look back and you don't really understand the process. It sort of just happened. But as an adult, you need to be a little bit more systematic. You need to think, well, obviously I need to practice, but how should I practice? What does an effective practice session look like? So in the book, I get at what I think are the best ways to develop skill as rapidly as possible in something without giving any sort of cheesy pseudoscientific quote unquote hacks. It's not about that. It's about what is going to make for effective practice habits so you can learn things as quickly as possible to the extent that they're going to be useful for you.
Yeah.
And in that in that sense, I identify a series of principles, but there's 4 main ones, and a number of them I take from the weight room. And you can remember them as the 4 R's. There's repetition, there's resistance, and then and most people are familiar with those if they're familiar with lifting weight, repetition, resistance. But there's 2 others that I think are really important: restriction and review. And then the book tries to both analyze each of these principles and then show how they apply across pretty much any skill you can think of, whether it's a fitness skill, whether it's writing, whether it's podcasting, whether it's advertising, whether it's persuasion, et cetera. All these principles can be applied. So in order to get better at many things, you have to first learn how to get better at least one thing. So the book is really as much about the skill of developing skill as it is an argument for stacking various skills.
Okay, when you talk about those 4 R's, 3 I understand, 1 I don't. So the repetition, resistance, and the review I understand, but what do you mean by restriction?
Yeah, and a lot of it, for the other principles too, I think there's a lot of elements that people might be delighted or surprised to hear about. Restriction is one that most people are not familiar with, but I'll give you an example of when I first learned this. I'm looking at my guitar again. When I was a young guitarist, I wanted to be that virtuoso. I wanted to be that hardcore specialist. Tyson, I wanted to be the best guitarist in the world, like however you could measure that.
Yeah.
So I became very pyrotechnic, right? I could play extremely fast. I was what musicians would call a shredder. But my guitar instructor, who was more of a generalist, saw that I was going too far in one direction. I wasn't a good musician. So what he would do to make me a better musician is he would apply restrictions around my practice. So he would say, okay, Pat, you've got to improvise on the fretboard, but you can only use your pointer finger. Well, that just took away my one tool that I had, which was speed, right? So this forced me to learn how to play more melodically, how to put more space between notes, and this application of restrictions, sort of setting these arbitrary bounds, made me a much better musician overall because it forced me to bring up certain areas of weakness or deficiency. We could also look at fitness from a programming perspective. Can I make myself stronger with just one piece of equipment or one specific weight? Take a 50-pound kettlebell. So I'm locking the intensity, the variable of intensity, right? And most people are pretty good with understanding that you need intensity or resistance, a form of resistance anyways, to get stronger.
Yeah.
But are they good enough as a coach to make somebody stronger by the use and manipulation of other variables, frequency, volume, duration? By the way, all these can apply to any skill outside of fitness. And the answer is you should be able to do that, but can you? So by applying restrictions, it forces you to get good at things that you might otherwise be ignoring, gaps, weaknesses, so on or so forth. So it's a lesson I originally learned on guitar, was reaffirmed to me in Taekwondo when Sam, who you know Sam, right?
Yeah.
Would bound one arm behind my back as I was sparring to expose weaknesses there. He would restrict me or set bounds, either in practicing techniques or in application, which are not ideal all the time, but they're a practice mechanism for speeding up development in a certain area.
So just going back a step, when Sam, who's also been a guest on the show, when he restricted your arm, what did you learn from that? What did you take away?
Yeah, well, one is not exposing a certain side, right? So for Taekwondo, a lot of it is point-based, point sparring, right? So sometimes you can get lazy with body positioning because you have limbs available,
Yeah.
right? So you by restricting one aspect that you might be leaning on too heavily or relying on too much, it forces you to focus on another aspect that you might have been ignoring because you were able to compensate for it. Is part of the big general principle behind that. Okay,
so what you're saying, say for example, my dominant leg would be my left leg. So if I was going to kick somebody, my automatic reaction would be a side kick from the left. So if he restricted my left-hand side, so if I've got no other, I can't use my arm, therefore I've got to go, what can I do with my right that I've been neglecting? Is that what he did there?
Yeah, and that's a great example. It's a very fundamental example. It's like, hey, my right and left sides aren't equal. They're not as strong. They're not as fast. They're not as sharp. So what do I do? Well, just restrict the use of your dominant side and practice on the weak side for a while, right? It's very intuitive.
In your book, how do you relate that back to business? If someone was reading the book, what do they take away from that point?
Yeah, so one thing that you can do is sort of figure out how can I bound or restrict growth in one area that I might be relying on too heavily. So I'll give you another example from experiences. I am a writer. My strength and background is in writing. And so I've always been able to rely fairly heavily on my communication abilities, copywriting to generate sales. But a weakness I had for many, many years were analytics. I was terrible at tracking stuff. So to get better at that, I bound my copywriting abilities. I kept everything, instead of coming up with new copy and new sales campaigns or whatever, I bound that. For a time I said, I'm going to lock this in because there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to make more money by just focusing on better data collection, list segmentation, and all these other back-end things that I've been putting off just because I've been good enough at copywriting that I've been able to be successful in spite of my poor analytic skills, for example. Yep. And now, again, you don't want to do this all the time because the ideal is a both and, not an either or. But sometimes you need to create an either or apply a restriction to force yourself to bring up an area of weakness that you might be covering up because some of your areas of strength are so dominant or so overriding. So copywriting was doing that for me in the same sense that my speed or pyrotechnic ability on guitar was so alluring to me and usually impress people that, I'd never developed my sense of melody as a musician or really great harmony or anything like that. Well, same thing. There was a lot that was left on the table in terms of my business because I was just so not a numbers guy, right? So not a flagging and tagging behavior guy on email lists and segmentation and all that I had to apply a restriction. I had to force myself to make more money keeping ceteris paribus, all else equal in terms of the copywriting and offers I was making, and just do a better job on the back end. And that made me a lot not fantastic. I'm still a much better copywriter, but it brought up an area of weakness that was pretty major in my business for a while. But take it the other way, right? Is some people are really great at the analytical stuff, but they're terrible copywriters. So for everybody, it's always going to be a little bit different. But what you have to learn to do, and this is where review comes in, and part of review is having a coach or a mentor, somebody who offers consulting like yourself, to be able to tell people this is where your weakness is, here's how we're going to improve it. And one way that we might be able to improve it is by applying some type of short-term restriction.
And people can do that to themselves. So if they know that they're very dominant in one particular area, they can deliberately restrict themselves in that area so they can build up a skill in another area. Then, long-term, put those two skills together and use both.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I remember when I was first getting into fitness, I was pretty, really getting into fitness, sort of middle high school. I was typical in the sense that I just loved to do, all upper body, mostly arms. Then I went and I broke my wrist, and there was a forced restriction on me, but I didn't want to stop working out. So then I finally had to develop my legs, Tyson. And then I realized that brought me so much further forward in all my overall fitness goals, especially as a generalist. Like, it actually helped me put on a lot of the muscle that I wasn't getting by just doing curls and bench press all the time. I needed to be doing squats and deadlifts and things like that. And I got good at pistol squats and a lot of body weight exercise too. So this wasn't something intentional. It's just something that happened, but I learned a lot from that experience and got a lot better because of that restriction. It balanced me out, but it improved me overall.
What's funny is my favorite football team in the NRL, the National Rugby League, is the Sydney Roosters. And this year they just won the grand final, like the version of the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So for anybody out there who is a Rooster supporter, go the Chooks. Anyway, their number one player, the guy that they signed up to help them win the grand final, the game before the grand final, he got a shoulder injury. And that's all we heard in the news is he had a shoulder injury. You found out after the grand final he actually had a broken scapula. Mm-hmm. So they taped him up, they threw him out in the field. After the game, everyone said he was the best player in the field to do absolutely nothing. And so what happened is, if they had pulled him out of the team, the other side would have just gone, great, he is out of the side, they can't win without him. But they left him in the team, and the whole team compensated for him not actually being able to do anything. But what he did do out there is, instead of touching the ball like he normally would every play and getting in there and doing 30, 40 tackles in a game, he actually stayed out of the play and he directed. He was like maestro out there, just telling the players where to go at what particular time. But he still just filled the space. The other team didn't realise he was as injured as what he was. They didn't say anything until after the game. And that's where...
Oh, that's funny.
When what you're talking about there, I can see how the whole team compensated for that one thing. They decided, we can't use him in the area we normally do, so what else can we draw upon? And it was the best game plan I think a team have ever done. And even people that don't like the Roosters, which I don't know why they don't, they all sit back and still go, that was amazing. What it did, it blew the other team away because they didn't know how to handle it. They weren't ready for that. No one was ready for that.
I like that. I like that example a lot, because if restriction it forces you to do anything, it forces you to think a different way. It forces you to get creative in ways you might not otherwise have considered. And that's always valuable, even if what you come up with in that sense isn't necessarily optimal or ideal. New connections are made. New opportunities are potentially created. I can tell you that because of the restrictions placed on me as a guitarist, I've been able to come up with certain tunes, some fairly catchy, I think, that I would not have ever developed unless those restrictions were in place. I've developed physical fitness in a way that I probably would have ignored if certain bounds weren't set around me. And then certainly in my business as well. Some self-imposed, some imposed, perhaps accidentally or just haphazardly or what have you. But yeah, that's a really good example, Tyson. I like that one. That's pretty funny.
So do I, because my team won. And
all the better.
All the better, yes, all the better. It's not my fault that I support an awesome team. Anyway, we've sort of been brought up with the idea that good is the enemy of great. So you'll be talking about someone when it comes to business ideas, and somebody will say, oh, is that a good idea or a great idea? And you go, oh, it's a good idea. And they're saying that all these good ideas could be getting in the way of a great idea that might take your business to the next level. But in the world of Pat Flynn and the way the Pat Flynn mind works, you're saying that great is actually the enemy of good.
Well, it can be. And certainly, don't let perfect get in the way either. I think that's an even greater mistake. Again, looking at the success I've had, again, if I'd have any success at all, that's for other people to judge, not me. And success is something I try to actually spend a lot of time defining in the book. I don't want people to think it's just a number in your bank account. It's certainly a limited view of success, but at the same time, you need something to measure progress by in terms of business, and economics is a good one. But I cannot attribute any of the success I've had to any truly one great idea. It's really been a collection and a series and a stacking of okay ideas to a little bit better ideas, a whole lot of failed ideas that I still got out there but didn't take off. And same thing with writing. Everything good is a process of editing. If you're waiting around for some great idea, or if you think that you're never going to be able to move forward unless that whatever it is that you're trying to do is perfected, then you're just never going to get started. It's delusional. There's a million quotes around this that, a good idea executed today is 1,000 times more valuable than a great idea executed a year from now, or something like that. And whatever the quote is, I think there's a lot of general truth to that. And, I especially for various levels of projects, and this is something I talk about in the book too, is when I wrote the book, Tyson, I wanted that book to be great. So I invested a lot of time into it. But when I write my daily sales email, I'll write it in 20 minutes, 20 minutes. I'll give it a rough edit, and then good enough is good enough. I just got to get it out. If I tried to put as much attention into making those emails as polished, as refined as, say, the book I've been working on, then I would never get them out. I would never make any sales. So different projects deserve different levels of attention. But even with the book, there comes a part where you just have to say, all right, this is as good as I can possibly make it for now. It's certainly not perfect, but this is the best that I've been able to do. I think I've said the things that I've needed to say, and it's time to get it out. It's time to move on.
Yeah, well, like they say, done and out the door is better than, was it perfect and in the drawer? So
I like that's even better than the one I gave. Thank you for that.
so I'll just tell people again, the name of your book is How to Be Better at Almost Anything. Now, once again, tell people where they can find this book or to do a pre-order, and then I want you to tell people how they can stalk you while you're asleep at night.
Oh, goody. Yes, my favorite, waking up to all sorts of weird messages in my Instagram and
Don't
Facebook.
You love that?
It's the best. So the book pre-order page, if everybody wants to check that out, I hope you do, is pretty simple. howtobebetterbook.com. That's howtobebetterbook.com. And check it out because we have a lot of really cool stuff for people who pre-order this book. But the cool stuff is only for the pre-order. So you definitely want to go and take advantage of that now, because once the pre-order is done, all that cool stuff. And like I said, we've got a lot of tactical stuff for business owners and fitness enthusiasts. That goes away after the pre-order. So take advantage of that for sure. And that's, at howtobebetterbook.com. To stalk me, chroniclesofstrength.com is my primary webpage. You can find me on Facebook, Pat Flynn, Instagram, Chronicles of Strength. But the best place is probably just to get on my email list. So either on my primary page, chroniclesofstrength.com, or if you're into kettlebells and working out, you can go to 101kettlebellworkouts.com and get a cool little PDF of some of my most love to hate kettlebell workouts. And
as soon as I hear that word kettlebells, straight away you go, can't sound good.
And then once you're on my email list, I'll push it all my social media outlets there. So I'm all over the place, Tyson. It confuses me sometimes.
Okay, I have one last question for you. So it's Monday morning. Someone's bumped into you. They said, I'm about to go into work. What's the number one thing you would tell me to get the most out of my day?
Yeah, become a short-term specialist. This is one of the big principles of my book. I say to be a generalist is to be a good short-term specialist. Don't try to do everything at once, either on the micro level, the meso level, or the macro level. If you want to get good to great at many things, if you want to be productive, right, truly productive, then you have to learn to really focus in on just one or two things at a time, grind that thing down to pulp, intellectually, physically, whatever it is that you're going after, grind that thing down until you have whatever amount of that thing done or completed that you need, that you can then shift focus to a new project, a new skill, a new hobby, etc. So I'm glad you asked that, because sometimes when I talk about generalism, immediately people want to go out and try and open a calculus book while trying to learn a musical instrument and training for both a powerlifting meet and a marathon. You're just going to go in circles. You're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to quit. What you have to do, the smart thing to do, is to focus in on just one or two things at a time, go all in on that while just maintaining everything else. Don't worry, you might even still improve, but just at least maintain everything else that's important to you.
Yeah.
Drive that skill up, finish that project, whatever it is, then switch focus. So a good generalist is a short-term specialist. Learn to do that is what I would say.
That is a perfect way to end this conversation today. Pat Flynn, thank you so much for coming on It's No Secret with Dr. T, and thank you for writing this book and passing me a copy so I could actually have a look at it. And I'm looking forward to getting the hard copy, because I like hard copy books myself personally.
As do I. Yes, I know. I'm not. Hurts the eyes. I know they say the Kindle doesn't bother the eyes. It bothers mine. I'm a paper and ink kind of guy.
Yeah, me too. Okay, Pat, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode with Pat Flynn, and I thought it was important to get it out there early because you can pre-order his book, How to Be Better at Almost Anything. And I think we could all benefit from being better at almost anything. Now, before I go, just want to let you know, if you've been enjoying this particular podcast series and you enjoyed this particular show, get onto iTunes and give us a review. It will put a massive, big smile on my face. Plus, it will give social proof to other people that this show is worth listening to. So don't forget, my normal episodes come out every Monday and a mini episode on Friday afternoon. Okay, that's it from me. Look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again shortly. Bye for now.